Hello and welcome back to the Noodle Bowl. The Noodle Bowl is still ill, but I am slowly getting on top of the backlog of work I have fallen behind on. This is going to be your breakdown for 86 episode 2. Later on, if I still feel okay, I will be doing the Moriarty the Patriot season 2 episode 3 breakdown. And then, fingers crossed, I am going to be out by one video. So, nearly there. Hello, welcome. I am Clockwork Noodles. This is a place where I talk about all the airing anime, past opinions, break down bits I like, and just talk about in general anime. So, if you are new to the channel, hello and welcome. Normally I sound better, but at the moment I sound trash. If you like the channel, like the content, give the channel a subscribe. It helps massively. It also will allow me to get an idea of what videos are doing okay, what videos aren't doing so well. I am considering dropping a title from the breakdowns, so it will all come down to generally what you guys are interested in. There is a Discord channel too, so you guys can get notified whenever videos go up. It's a bit of a chaotic time when videos are going up left, right and centre, so make sure you are in the loop. Let's go back to 86. Something I didn't mention last week was the composer. It is God himself. I love this man to pieces. Hiroyuki Sawano. I adore him. There is so much of his music on my playlist. I just love him. He is just what he does and just how he works and all of the way that he just composes these amazing pieces. Generally as well, he performs very good when back to a anime of war, an anime with a struggle involved. Last season, his work on show on Attack on Titan, this time in 86. Although the 86 work really reminds me of his classic work from Aldnoah Zero. I never knew how to pronounce the first word on that. But it really reminds me of that because, well, maybe this anime's got mech in it. It's a bit futuristic. But let's get to it. We can gush about Hiroyuki Sawano a little later on during the fight scene. Last week, the end, we saw the 86ers being disturbed and hearing Vladlina for the first time. We just get to see the other side of that. We start the episode this week in District 86, or the non-existent district, which technically is off record. I actually prefer being in this district. I think it feels less constricted. Even though everybody here is conscripted to war, everybody also feels more human. We get to find out a bit more about the world, the fact that there are engineers, the people who make these mechs run. There are more than just being on the front line kind of jobs. There's jobs all around the place as well, which is quite cool. Indirectly learn about Shin's bad habits, his habit of wrecking his mechs, breaking their legs apparently. We do get to see exactly how this happens in the scene later on. He's a little reckless when it comes to pushing his mechs to the limit. Nice little bits of banter that we gain some information. It would make sense that an engineer would say, hey, can you maybe give me a break for a little bit? Stop breaking all your mechs. So the conversation doesn't feel too exposition heavy. Shin is indeed the Undertaker, so he hasn't really got the issue of driving a mech somebody died in. It is kind of in the name. But I do like the icons. I mentioned it last week, little paintings, the drawings on the sides of the mechs. It is reminiscent to the pilots in the war, who would paint ladies, often enough ladies, on the sides of their planes. It's a nice personal touch, and it also, I think it gave them motivation, it spurred them on. The anime also shows us directly how many people have died in this war by showing us the box that Shin keeps under his seat. I think it's under his seat, and it's all the names of the people who are his fallen members. It shows us as well that he has his own way of remembering them, which is a bit of a contrast because we also saw how Vladlina remembered the fallen soldiers, and her way is with the white lilies. So both of the MCs, we'll call them two MCs here, both have their way of remembering the dead. The 6th handler pig caricature is up on the wall, and the new partnership begins. Gonna be interesting to see if Vladlina can last a little longer, but it does seem like the way she is, because she seems like a complete contrast to the other people in her districts and Magnolia. So it does seem like she's off to a good start, that she's got more of a chance to actually be able to get along with these guys because she sees them as human. She doesn't see them as just autonomous or pigs or not even human. Or under-evolved, I think we see here later on. The visuals of a war-torn world in this non-existent region. I really like the artwork. I love the details in the background and all of the world building in this. This is the first time we also get to see 86 as a district. San Magnolia last week was our open. We got to see how modern, how uniform that world was. Whilst this really feels like something more reminiscent of us, the past. We can see that there's cracks in the road. Nature is reclaiming bits. And we start to come under fire as our enemy starts to ready an attack. So this is the first time we also get introduced to the enemy visually. But Sawano's score, absolutely mind-blowing. It's got that familiar build that we're all kind of used to. It slowly builds and it starts to have that onward beat as we're getting ready because the enemy is oncoming. He's very good at portraying war in a sense through his music, through his ever ongoing beats that are relentless beats that continue onwards, and they build and they soar during the climax often. The enemy is so numerous it blacks out the sun, aka there's a weather change. It starts to get a little dicey when Shin informs Vladlina that they have already deployed themselves, so essentially she is late to the party and they're already ahead, so they will be doing things his way, where you can start to see perhaps where he might have rubbed up previous handlers, especially if a handler didn't want to be told by a drone or someone he didn't consider human what they're doing, or they're going to be basically following their own kind of rules, their own intuition in a sense. You can see where he would rub up someone the wrong way. The score starts to shift as we start to ready our attack. Sawano really at his best when it comes to war animes. We can see that the Legion is also using drones. It's an introduction to the enemy and their tech as well. I love the unit roll call, hearing the nicknames, seeing the icons as well. Naturally, you know on the other side, these names are no more than lines on a page that Vladlina will be seeing. We start to get some more Vladlina and Shin interactions. It's cold, it's pretty precise, but you can't blame Shin. He has been conscripted to war to fight for people who don't even see him as a human being. So this does feel hairy and it's uncomfortable, but again, fully understandable. But unlike the previous handlers, I'm taking a bet that her actually listening to Shin and her actually accepting his input will definitely help their relationship. The fight is nice, it's busy, it's explosive, the soundboard sounds good, the animation is smooth. Shin starts to take his own intuition, acting on his own without permission or anything. But it probably is more effective because he can physically see the threat in person. I can imagine it's harder to take an instruction for someone who's only looking at data on a board. So it does make more sense for him to be a bit more free in the way he acts. Did initially go, wait, this is going to hint to Vladlina that he's definitely not an unmanned drone. So if there was any doubt before that there were humans involved, she definitely knows now there are. The mechs are beautifully drawn, they're detailed, the aging looks nice. I like the fight, the bits where you see the drones being falling apart, bits breaking off as Shin takes out a leg or so. The Undertaker uses height, he uses fog, he uses his environment, the smoke, to his advantage to take out units, abuses their blind spots and also attacks their weak points, acting alone and on impulse, perhaps to even prevent more loss. The more people he could take out alone, the less likely somebody else may take a hit. Victory is ours for now. It's our halfway point. It's time to change perspectives now. I don't really like being in San Magnolia too much. I don't know why. It just feels toxic. It feels stuffy, which is, of course, the point. We see the scenario play out with Vladlina's point of view, the conversation with her and Shin. And this next sequence is tense. Let's just say it's tense because we get our first history lesson. And no doubt you are hearing propaganda. You are hearing history written by the victors. We are at war with the kingdom of Giad, and we're told that their machines only have a life expectancy of 2 years. We keep hearing this idea that they believe that the war's going to be over in 2 years. I'm just a little bit, I question it because surely they could build more robots which are going to have a longer lifespan. Are we really certain that the war's going to be over in 2 years? But you can see in the lecture, as most history lectures go down, there's very few people actually paying attention. Nobody cares. These guys, compared to their brethren who are the same age, who are fighting for their lives, these guys are bored in a sense. They don't have to do a great deal. So they have the leisure to actually muck around. The lecture is being overseen by the military. I like the addition of putting him in the corner, keeping an eye on things to ensure propaganda is essentially probably being spread the way that it should. Everything feels really tense because the lecturer too, also, he seems really uncomfortable at times. He looks tense. Naturally, we get a outburst from Vladlina, who has decided to come along, and she's not taking kindly to hearing the false history, where she decides to drop the bomb and give us a true history. The true history helps us, the audience, because we can definitely believe that this is actually the case. We find out the citizens were withdrawn to 85 districts, and everybody within these districts no longer had rights. Their citizenship rights were stripped if they were not meeting standards. So we've already seen it. I mentioned it last time. Everybody has silver hair. Everybody has these silver eyes, where they are called Alba. So they're standards of Alba. I have heard through the grapevine that this anime is an allegory for World War II, and I can pretty much see it. District 86 is full of the people who do not meet the standards, and they are the ones who end up having to be conscripted for 5 years doing their terms. This whole outburst, as much as you're like, yes, this is great, I feel great that she's actually speaking up against it, doing the right thing, it just feels really, really nerve-wracking because you're like, you shouldn't be doing this. I know you shouldn't be doing this. There is definitely going to be repercussions for this because you are essentially teaching falsities to the law that they're teaching, the history they're teaching. What she's doing kind of underpins their society, in a sense, their history. The sun starts to set in the classroom. I like that little addition. It gets darker in the room. And this happens when we learn that Vladlina actually went to the battlefield. So that also backs us up knowing that the reason why she is so adamant there's people involved is because she saw them. She's been there. We also kind of learn from what this whole sequence gives us is the people in Magnolia. They know there's people in those drones, but they don't consider them people. They even say, didn't they evolve incorrectly? They didn't evolve correctly, so they're nothing more than like pigs or livestock. So they know there's things in those drones. They just choose to call them unmanned. Maybe it makes them feel better. Who knows? And the backlash, the lecturer starts to speak out because obviously he has to say something. At least if he says something, he clears his back to say, hey, I did try and stop her. The class also shows us the power of propaganda. Both of them reconfirming that no, there's no people there. They just look like people, but they haven't evolved in the same way. We get to see how toxic the propaganda really is. Vladlina continues to dispute this fact, even in the threat of repercussions. The scene felt really uncomfortable because I was constantly waiting for her to be arrested, waiting for someone to come in and escort her out, something. We cut to a very different, refreshing scene. Vladlina talks about the Undertaker, and she tells us that they have been speaking nightly, going beyond terms of work, but it just felt a bit weird. This is the point I had a little issue with. It's just because it felt like it came out of nowhere. It felt a little bit odd because we've not really seen it. If they hadn't have given us the closing sequence, I would have been like, this feels like it's come out of nowhere. It feels like you've skipped a little bit with the building of their relationship to the point that she's calling every night. The visual of her badge on her uniform unclipping. This could be foreshadowing. Will she eventually get silenced by someone, or is the Undertaker going to die? There's just a few little things that came to my mind as soon as I saw it, because the idea of the badge unclipping on a uniform, it just looks a little bit foreboding. It's just a little tiny visual cue that they didn't need to put in. The dead flower visual too, also backing me up on the forebodingness. Either nobody's died yet, so she hasn't got the flowers, so it's a good thing and there's no flowers in the vase, or it's foreshadowing the death of innocence of some sort. Also, it must be bad for both of them if she keeps bugging him at midnight. She keeps calling him literally dead at night, but it does seem like she is actually happily talking. So it does feel like it's coming out of nowhere because we've only seen 2 interactions so far in the main anime, because then we cut to our ED at this point, which really does give us those Aldnoah Zero themes, vibes, and it's definitely not a bad thing. Me saying it reminds me of another anime. It's a good anime it reminds me of, so it's fine. The ED is great, it really fits, but it also fits because it also is written by the same composer, so it doesn't feel out of place. Have you ever watched an anime where it might have a certain theme, the vibe, or the soundboards itself also have a certain way of sounding, the background music sounds weird, and then it cuts to maybe something like rap, something which really is jarring. The end scene is probably my favourite part of this episode, which I know sounds weird, but it is my favourite sequence, where we get to see more happy times with the 86ers, their relationships, how they unwind, and some more world building, of course. But we start to see them discussing Vladlina, how maybe actually she might not be just that rich spoiled kid. The cat roaming around as well. I love animals, so me seeing a cat, kudos to this world, is even better because you've got cats. Anju is giving out cake, and she looks a little bit like an Alba, but she has blue eyes. So that almost kind of shows you that this world is just that toxic that even just having one of those traits but not having the eyes can also get you conscripted, get you stripped of all of your rights because you're not good enough, you're not perfect enough. It just shows you how toxic the world really is. Shin is reading to distract himself, but that also can show us that he's actually a little bit stressed. He needs to shut down, he needs to find something to distract him, otherwise, well, he's probably going to be in a very bad place. But he is, of course, a perfect shot. We find out it's been a full week of conversations, which is the new record, and we start to get a bit more of an insight into the actual conversations finally. So this actually then, if they hadn't had this bit, I would have been probably giving them a sin for the fact that it felt like we were missing out with them just going, oh yeah, now they're talking happily. Would have felt a bit weird, but I'm glad we get this. A little bit uncomfortable as a conversation, but it does end up lightening up. It feels a bit better, where she starts to ask him just what are you up to, what you're doing. It doesn't seem hostile at that point anyway. Shin actually congratulates her on her work. This might just be down to duty, it might just be what he's doing, but he didn't have to do that, so it feels nice. The conversation starts to flow. She starts to promise that if you actually fill out your reports better, I will read them. We get the whole, I know we don't read them, but I promise we will. So we are indirectly told that the 86ers submit reports. They don't actually end up being read because, well, they are unmanned drones. That's not important. But she promises, actually, I will read them. But he does say, I'm not good at reading and writing. Again, giving us an insight that there's actually no schools within the camps. And it just shows you the poor conditions that these guys are actually living in. They have no rights, so they haven't got a right to read, write, or learn anything. She does actually get, in quite a nice little way, she's quite relentless in the way she does it. She eventually gets him to agree that I will actually submit reports. In the conversation as well, this conversation mainly giving us all the information that helps fitting these missing pieces. We'll learn about terms. We'll learn that a term is about 5 years and that Shin is 129 days now away from finishing. The conversation does start to feel quite nice. It feels a bit more relaxed, where she even starts to ask, what are you going to do once you retire from your service? But Shin hasn't thought about it. This might be because he being conscripted, going to fight day in, day out, seeing people around him getting snuffed out in the blink of an eye. Maybe he thinks he's not going to survive 129 days. Maybe he just doesn't think that it's appropriate to think of freedom when he still hasn't quite made it. So he hasn't quite got to that goal yet. Perhaps that is the case. Perhaps as well that he just doesn't know what he wants to do. Oddly enough, Vladlina does actually make a hint that he could become a citizen again. This is interesting. So is it a possibility that when they finish their service, they can be accepted into San Magnolia? But why would you want to? Would you really want to live with people who oppressed you and forced you to fight? Also, you would get the feeling that you really wouldn't be welcome living there. The smile at the end of the conversation by Shin, I think that's priceless. I think it's such a beautiful little moment. Next week's episode is very foreboding. I don't want to die. I can't wait for next week. Definitely not. I think the episode has some good moments. I do like the split worlds, the way we get to go one world to another world. I like that split perspectives we get. The lecture felt really, really nervous. I felt really, really tense during it. It shows us the level of propaganda that is going on in the world. We can understand why people are believing there's unmanned drones, because that's how they're taught, that's why they're being raised, that's how they're being brought up. She might have her uncle to protect her, but I do believe there will be a limit at some point. Is she going to cross it? Is repercussion coming her way at some point? The conversation between Shin and Vladlina and the 86ers, basically the end sequence, the best bit in my opinion, just showing how these guys start to converse, interact, things start to relax a little bit more. The initial conversation when she introduced herself, only Shin replied, but this time it's a week later. Everyone replies because they understand the handler at least sees them as people, and they don't have to hide the fact that they're, or pretend, and hide under these falsities that they're simply just drones. The conversation helps us understand the idea of terms, the life of an 86er, what they essentially live and how they don't, the things they don't really have in their own districts, what they are deprived from having. Hiroyuki Sawano score, absolutely fantastic. Really nice classical vibes to his early work. The battle sequence was even more hype. That is all I've really got to say for this episode. I'm enjoying it. I'm having some fun with it. Gotta be interesting to see where the plot goes. Can we also break the toxic way that Magnolia works? Is there a hope for the people of 86? That is my question. I can't wait to see what happens. So make sure you guys take care of yourselves. Thank you again for being supportive, and I will see you guys next week. Bye bye, guys.